Welcome to the Destiny of Manufacturing podcast. I am your host, Dean Phillips, and I have with me today from TuscoMFG, I have with me Mike Lauber, who is the CEO. Welcome, Mike.
Hi, Dean. Happy to be with you.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. I am sure that there is some fire you should be putting out, but you took time to be here.
Happy to do it.
Thank you. Right off the bat, what is your big takeaway over things that you think are critical over the next 5 years that you see coming?
Oh, heavens. That's such a small topic. Depending on how you want to look at it, you could break it into a number of categories. First and foremost, for most of us, I think, is workforce. We have a bit of a birth dearth, certainly in the Midwest and Northeast. Um, so where are your future associates going to be coming from? Um, And I think we have to be very proactive in manufacturing, where many kids today don't know what modern manufacturing is really about. They've heard stories, they've watched movies, uh, you know, uh, their parents and grandparents have said, "Oh, don't go into that. That's dirty, dark, and dangerous." But in fact, most modern manufacturing operations are anything but. They're technology intense. They are flexibility valued, and we're using more brains than we are brawn in this day and age. And in fact, in our little operation, we have fewer than 100 people. Um, Over half of our people are women doing conventional metal fabricating work. So um, in, we've got to be more intentional about introducing the rest of the community and those coming into the workforce um, to what manufacturing can be right here, at home, as opposed to having to think you have to go somewhere else. So
Yeah.
workforce is a really big one, and we're losing a lot of folks my age to retirement, and with that, those skills, that tribal knowledge, we need to make sure gets transferred to those that are staying behind. Another workforce trend is people don't stay for 5 and 25 and 45 years in the same place anymore. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's a thing, and you can't count on always having the same people here. So you need to be always thinking about recruiting and retaining, recognizing even if you're the best place in the world to work, people will move more frequently today than they have in the past. So that's on the workforce side. Supply chain, when I started in my business 45 years ago, my supply chain was most of it within 200 miles of where I am, and most of my clients were within 200 miles of where I am. Today, my clients are scattered around the world, and so is my supply chain. We've got to be really smart about how we buy and smart about how we get found by those clients. We're not necessarily going to be, within an easy drive of those prospective clients. So, getting found, SEO and GSO now, with the rising, soon to be dominance of AI search. Um, Making sure you're found when people go looking for what you do is incredibly important. So supply chain, but also from a marketing standpoint, the other side of the ledger. Um, you can't talk about manufacturing without talking about technology and automation. And even smaller shops like our own, we recognize we've got to be continually looking at how do we better automate. And it's not just a robot at a press. We have robots, yes. Um, but it's automating all the things that lead up to when the job actually starts on the floor. How good is your ERP system? How good are all of your systems from an engineering standpoint, from an ideation standpoint, to a communication standpoint? All of those technological issues are incredibly important. We're using AI and other tools like never before, and I know we're going to only see more and more of that to be successful, to be competitive, to be accurate at what we're doing, and less reliant on human beings to do work that human beings don't have to do anymore.
Mhm.
So we want the people doing what people are uniquely capable of doing, developing relationships and troubleshooting issues and solving problems, but also using the technology when it's better suited to do those things like solving problems or providing information. I would uh, I'd be remiss if I didn't say another issue over the next few years is to understand trade policy. You know,
Mm.
on a kind of global basis, the whole reshoring idea. We have clients who have come to us and prospects looking to reshore here in the States. The tariff schemes are still greatly in flux. A lot of our clients um, have been almost reticent to make changes because they're not sure how things are going to settle out. But we'll see some settling, and clients can't postpone their needs forever. We've had a really dynamite year and expect a dynamite 26 coming behind it, and so forth. But how do you respond to changes in trade policy? Um, and that affects supply chain as well as the client base, out there. And I guess the last thing I would say is, how are the markets going to continue to evolve? One of the hot areas a lot of us in the metal fab world have been involved in is the electric vehicles. Awful lot of startups out there, and um, new operations in the automotive realm that have required new parts and new suppliers to do that. But there'll be other sectors. I think in the power generation world is another huge one coming fast and furiously. Um, and part of that's driven by AI and the power demands. So
Mhm.
we're seeing opportunities in those places, as well as the data centers, which are holding a lot of this stuff, the billions and billions being invested. And a lot of that ends up needing racking. And a lot of that racking is made out of metal. So I know a lot of people are playing in those kinds of sectors. So they're definitely going to be winners over the next 5 years. And I would say in those areas in particular, just as there have been winners more recently. With the advent of Amazon and warehouse and distribution centers popping up on every corner, uh, there have been opportunities to serve with conveying equipment and labeling equipment, and all those sorts of things have been a great growth. For us back in the 80s, the 70s and 80s, it was the big box growth where we went from in the late 70s at about 4.5 square feet of retail space for every man, woman, and child. And by the 90s, it was 10 times that here in the United States. We became very overbuilt with retail. But for every one of those stores, it required racks, stock gondolas, signs, also shopping carts, all those sorts of things. So you have sectors that kind of come, wax, and wane.
Yeah.
Retail has waned to some extent. We do about half the business we do is store fixture type work. And stores still very much matter. About 85 cents out of every dollar that US consumer spends, they spend in a physical store still. And consequently, what happens in those stores, those retailers and the brands that are being sold in those retailers care intensely about presenting themselves as effectively as possible. There aren't any Kmarts anymore, but gosh, for every Kmart, there are $10 generals out in
Mhm.
the world, and those still need various forms of merchandising, and most of that's metal too.
Right. And I love when you talk about the retail space and how it it has evolved and changed, but we said the same thing in computers years ago was like, oh, we're not going to print documents anymore. We're not going to need paper anymore. And I think in that first year after that projection was made, I think it went to double and then quadruple in the next year of how much paper we used. It was insane how much more paper we used than what we thought we would because of that. And I think same is true in the retail space. Everybody says, well, we don't really need retail space. We just need to have more effective retail space. We need to be better at how we manage it. And I think you see the systems that are in place dictate that nowadays. When you go in, you walk into a store, your experience is a lot different. Years ago, when I used to live in Memphis about 20 years ago, they were working with Walmart at that time to develop these scanners where you would walk down the aisle, and because you were in that aisle, one of the things was is that, oh, well, you scan what you were buying, and you might get a coupon that says, hey, I know you bought Coca-Cola, but maybe you prefer Pepsi for 30 cents off. And that was kind of their direction of instant coupons to kind of work in that, because everyone's trying to get more market share. Everyone's trying to figure out another way to get that consumer dollar a greater portion of it. And I love what you said there. You know, that's incredible. Can I ask you to, you mentioned about the perception people have of manufacturing. Can you elaborate on some of the things that you've done to kind of pull in that next generation of worker? What are things that you've done that you've said, hey, we've got to adjust what we used to do to what we do now?
Well, Dean, I'll mention a couple things. First of all, hey, it's October. It's Manufacturing Month. And Friday, October 3 is Manufacturing Day. Guess what?
Absolutely.
It's like a holiday in a sense. We invite all sorts of school kids, particularly those working in the um, in trades, to come in an organized fashion to see what we do. We have actually a high school across the street from our primary location, and there's a steady stream of kids that come over here that work potentially part-time. We have kids during the summer and during the holidays, but we also have kids that come after school. And there are things that they can do in our manufacturing environment to get kind of comfortable with the idea, hey, this is pretty cool. And you pay what? Now, most of those kids don't think about the benefits, but most of us in manufacturing offer terrific benefits for more of the adult mind on
Hmm.
health and life and retirement and all those sorts of things,
Right.
wellness, um, that you're just not going to get at a lot of other kinds of jobs. So it's really getting their feet on your floor,
Hmm.
and then promoting it from the standpoint of here's what you can do. A lot of kids, we're in a rural area here in Ohio, and a lot of kids figure, well, there's nothing here for me. And part of what we've done, and we've done with other manufacturers in the area, is try to convince them, you know what? You can have a great career right here. You can go off to college, you can go get a degree in this or that or another thing, but don't assume that you can't come back to a good job, because there are a lot of good jobs here. And
Right.
we find that the kids may not think that, but their parents like the idea of them getting back, not to their basements, don't get me wrong, uh, but that they could have their families back in the area. And we're seeing some of that reshoring happening too, where kids may go off and work for 5 or 10 years and then look to come back to raise their families in a place like what we have here.
Hmm. That is terrific. Do you find that you have to kind of elaborate on the why you do what you do so that they understand the importance of their career path, as opposed to, well, 40, 50 years ago, or even 20 years ago, people had to, well, I'm getting a paycheck. It's a good paycheck and it's a good job and it's a reliable job. That's not today's workers, the younger people, that you have to explain why what they do is important.
I don't think honestly, any more than what we've ever needed to. You have, you know, a, every organization has a culture, whether
Hmm.
that organization has one person or 1,000 working there. And people look for the culture that fits their interest. So, yes, you could make an argument that years ago, people were, may have been a generation or two ago, were thinking, how do I maximize the amount of money I can make? So I want to get the most, so can I work a lot of overtime? And we find that people are less interested in working a lot of overtime. So we take that as a challenge to figure out how do we right size ourselves continually, um, so that we're not calling on people to work regularly 6 days a week. We used to be that place. We used to be that 20 years ago where people, well, hey, I like working 6 days, and that's why I work here. It pays for my boat, it pays for my vacation, it's paying for my kids' educations. And today, we find people are more interested about how can I get in there, do a good job, and then go off and do the other things that I want to do. And I'm not sure that's necessarily any different today overall than it used to be,
Hmm.
but there is some greater appreciation, I think, perhaps of the Gen Zs and Gen Alphas
Right.
thinking in those terms.
That's
Some
great.
of that
Now,
too is, post-COVID, where a lot of
hmm
jobs we didn't realize we could do remotely or in a hybrid sense are actually still today being that way. You know, in in December of 2019, right before COVID, about 5% of the US population worked remotely in some fashion. And at the height of COVID in May of 2020, 41% of the American workforce worked remotely.
hmm
Now, it's not that anymore, but it's never going back to the 5%. And we have a
No.
number of people here that work from home because they can. Or I'm in the office Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I'm at home on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Or hey, next week, I'm going to work from home these days. And if it's jobs that you can do, great. Awful lot of manufacturing has to be done on site, no question.
Right.
But even in COVID, we had 37% of our workforce worked remotely, and I would have never thought we could have done that. So that's a new understanding of how we need to work together. It doesn't necessarily mean we have to be together all the time.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that brings up the old adage of necessity is the mother of invention. And
Yes, sir.
when COVID hit, cameras went through the roof. Sales for cameras to work on Zoom, work on Teams, work on any one of the other platforms. And people started to look at things a little bit different. I had a friend of mine who was on the board with me from Boeing, and he said, "Well, so much of it uh, is hands-on, so it has to be that way." And I said, "You say it has to be that way, but that's because you haven't explored any other options." So things like uh, there's companies out there that have started going to remotely driven forklifts and things like that because we think we have to have it in person, but maybe there's another option. You mentioned earlier about using robots. Does that robot have to be programmed, or can it be remotely operated, that robot, by a person somewhere else? Because robots are great for following a pattern, but if you have things that have to deviate or change, can that person now work that robot remotely? Because we talk about some of those things. So
It also opens up jobs to people who are other abled, who may be
100%.
wheelchair bound or
Yep.
cannot stand, for 8 hours a day or whatever the case may be. And it's a way for them to be able to, be engaged in this too. I completely agree. And by the way, we have a great new client. I won't mention their specific name, who's in the um, automated forklift world,
Okay.
where they're autonomous.
Yes.
Um,
Wow. Even
and
better.
that's increasingly going to be a thing we're going to see too.
Yeah. And it all, we always complain about COVID, and it was horrible. Don't get me wrong. It was horrible. But because of that, there was that silver lining in it that it changed the way we were thinking. We were trending in that direction. It just accelerated it because everybody had to immediately make different decisions. Do I need to have an office? A lot of people had offices across the nation. And it's like, well, can't they just work from home? Yeah. And some did, some didn't, but
Yeah.
a lot of people said, we don't need this space. We can, if we need to have an on-demand meeting space, we can go and rent a space. Why do we need offices that nobody's sitting at?
If we end up with more Waymo uh, uh, self-driving vehicles, do I need to have a car, or do I need to have transportation when I need that transportation? I actually said to one of my daughters about 8 years ago, and so it hasn't come to pass, but I said, by the time you're 30, you're not going to need or want to own a car because you want transportation. You will say on your phone, I need to go from point A to point B, and this is the cargo I'm going to be hauling, and a vehicle will show up at your doorstep, and you will do that, on an automated basis. I think we'll see more of that. And, good news is, those of us in the manufacturing world, we're gonna have stuff to make.
Yeah.
But will we need as many parking lots? Will we need as many traffic lights? Will we need as much infrastructure if you have fewer and fewer people physically driving and you have kind of the robotic driving? It's going to change how things work too.
Yeah. And I think a lot of places, it just changes the way your mindset. But I think you have to have that. I would say that this is a great time. I tell people this all the time is that when I was kind of grew up in the early 80s, and that was when the computer boom was just hitting. And I took classes on computers and all of that and electronics. And one of the things at that time, everybody says, well, that was a great time. And it was for technology development. But today, the one thing that's really impresses me is availability of things. Drones, the technology that used to make drones that were $1 million+ is the same technology that's used today in a drone that's about no bigger than this big. And it's the same thing for 3D printing. And every technology that you have now is the accessibility and availability that you have to options like cobots, for instance. Cobots have
Yeah.
changed the face of it. You used to have this big, gigantic floor space, and they had to be. Well, did I need that for moving this small part? Now this cobot can do a lot of that and work alongside an individual. So,
And do it
have you
safely.
and do it safely? Great point. Is that something that now tell me a little bit about how you got involved in manufacturing? Tell me your story.
Well, Uh, the long and short of it is, I was born on third base. I didn't hit a triple. My family bought this business about the time I was coming out of college. We went on and bought a number of other manufacturing and a couple other businesses outside of manufacturing, and we've spawned a few other businesses out of this one. But this was the first one, and my siblings ended up running multiple companies, selling most of them. I'm the eldest, and I'm the one still going at it. The only one. The first one is still at it. So my dad was a commercial banker and hated banking, and wanted to get out of that, and he didn't believe in nepotism in a public company, which he ran, but he believed in nepotism, and he wanted to get something that he could involve his kids in. And eventually we didn't work directly with one another. We had our own operations, but with their help, we were able to, acquire them and successfully, in most of those cases, unacquire them and go on and do other things. So
Mhm.
that's
Great.
the bulk of it. I came here with the understanding I'd be here, 5 years or so, and then I'd go do something else. Um, and that was 45 years ago. So
Yeah. I had a good friend of mine that worked with me uh, at a stamping facility, and we made stamping presses. And after about 4 or 5 years, I told him, I said, Scott, if you don't get out now, you're never getting out. I'm just telling you right now, because this is the type of business manufacturing is. It's and you see the same people. You go to like the Fab Tech show or the
yeah,
stamping conference. you go to those and it's the same people. It is a very close knit family dynamic that you have with working with these people, and they become friends, and it's an amazing opportunity. And I don't ever want people to think that this is not a great opportunity or a great industry to work in.
Well, the thing I
It
would
is.
say too is people underappreciate, and we're involved in a number of trade groups, including PMA. Um, People underappreciate the value of camaraderie within an industry. That I know if my place burned down tomorrow, I've got 10 people I could call and say, hey, can you help me? Can you run stuff for my clients? Can you help me recover from this? And 10 out of 10, they'd be there for me, just as I would be for them. And there have been a couple instances where I've seen that absolutely happen. But it's also, we're dealing with the same issues, the same challenges. Um, it's not a collusive sort of thing, but there's an opportunity for cooperation. And we're still competing in some cases. And so be it. Hey, I'm trying to figure out how to buy a particular piece of machinery. I'm looking at a different kind of technology. I want to do, I'm, we're going to replace our ERP system. What do you have? And help me not make the same mistakes you made. And people are eager to help because we're brothers and sisters in this world. And it's not just PMA, not just metal forming. It works in other industries just the same.
Yeah, yeah. Manufacturing is that way. I've always found that I've never asked a question from somebody say, "Hey, what are you doing about this?" And they were not willing to talk about what they did and offer ideas and offer suggestions. It's a great opportunity. In fact, that's what is the biggest reason like PMA has networking groups. One of the biggest reasons we do is because of the value of that.
And we
As you,
participate. We participated in a couple of them. CEO. I'm in one of the CEO groups for the last
Mhm.
25 years, and there's a CFO group that we
Yeah,
participate in as well. And the MDA program, we've had a number of people go through that. We'll have more. So, couldn't agree with you more. I want to say something too. Just as people announced the death of retail prematurely. The same thing for manufacturing. And it was probably 10 years ago that I had a client come to our facility and say, I didn't know people were still manufacturing anything here in this country. Now that's a sign of ignorance, frankly.
yeah,
But
yeah,
we have seen a real resurgence, in particular, I would say in the last 15 years, post 2018, or excuse me, post '08, where um, making things still matters and the opportunities exist to do that. We have to be smart about it. We can't compete on raw material. We can't compete on inexpensive labor. But we as a nation have always found creative ways to be more productive than the folks in most other countries. That's part of part of our DNA as Americans,
yeah.
I believe. And we're going to keep making things. And look at all the billions, tens of billions, hundreds of billions that have been invested in the last, again, say 15 years here in the United States to make stuff.
Yeah.
But this is still a place you want to be.
100%. Mike, thank you so much for taking time to be here today. And we will see you pretty soon at the Fabrication Summit coming up. We appreciate your time, and we appreciate our audience's time for being here. Once again, this is Dean Phillips from the Destiny of Manufacturing podcast.